Oh boy, where do I even begin with this one? That's the biggest problem now. I'm trying to write a review of the Marvel series She-Hulk Attorney at Law, and honestly, I'm stumped here. Not because I have writer's block or anything, or because I don't have anything to say. Believe me, I have plenty to say. It's just difficult to put it into proper context when reviewing a series like She-Hulk. Stan Lee once said that when he was starting at Marvel, the publisher said that comic books are for kids and stupid adults. Something which Stan thankfully never believed, which is why we have Marvel in the MCU. Yet it seems that not everyone who worked on She-Hulk believes that statement, but they openly have hostility and resentment towards the very people who are supposed to be their audience. She-Hulk is an unmitigated mess with little narrative structure, sloppy writing, and a story, if you can call it that, which meanders and climaxes into an utterly pointless self-referential moment that thinks it's being clever while extending the middle finger towards anyone who's a fan of this genre. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. You see, She-Hulk isn't so much a television series or any sort of serialized storytelling. That's because it doesn't have a story. The best way to describe She-Hulk is that it has a bunch of scenes that it attempts to string together into some sort of cohesive narrative, but only giving the bare minimum in terms of connective tissue. There's no story or plot to speak of. Well, there is, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Over the 9-episode Flatline, it doesn't have an arc, we get to know Jennifer Walters, played by Tatiana Maslany, who herself is a gifted actress. I enjoyed her work in Orphan Black, and she was brilliant in that, so I have no doubts about her acting ability. However, in She-Hulk, Maslany's Jen Walters is an irredeemable who feels the need to remind you at every opportunity that she's right and everyone else is wrong.
Basically, I was right and Bruce was wrong.
And everyone needs to listen to her, even though she's been wrong about everything. And ultimately, she fails upward without any repercussions for her actions. Apparently, she must have went to the Alex J. Kurtzman School of Law. That, however, is not the worst part of She-Hulk, as the series' problems go so deep that you couldn't even root them out with a colonoscopy. I wish I could say that I like the interaction between the characters on She-Hulk, but there really aren't any. Not any interactions, there aren't any characters. There's only 2 characters in the whole thing, Jen Walters and her best friend Nikki. The rest of the players in what should be an ensemble cast walk in and out of the scenery, and the only purpose they serve is for Walters and Nikki to mock them and to remind you how they're right and everyone else is wrong. Supporting characters descend into the worst stereotypes imaginable and do nothing to advance the plot, only reminding you how poorly written this series is. Quite a bit of screen time in She-Hulk is spent on just that, screen time. Jen checks her phone, texts, makes phone calls. I know that's probably not uncommon for a lawyer, even a bad one at that. However, it's not very compelling and makes you wish they would get to some kind of action. We get dribs and drabs of what her everyday life is like. However, the life of a superhero isn't an easy one as we've seen in previous Marvel movies. For what billed itself as a legal comedy in the Marvel Universe, Jennifer Walters spends very little time doing any actual legal work. And the times she appears in court, she's a witness, or she outright loses. The rest of the time, we watch Jen attempting to date, drinking, and dealing with some sort of problem that just kind of conveniently works itself out. The visual aspects of She-Hulk are no better. The CGI at times is so poorly integrated into the shot that it looks like as if it came out of a 70s or 80s sitcom. She-Hulk looks so awkwardly cartoonish that it's difficult to believe this costs somewhere, as it's been reported, $25 million per episode. Characters look as if they're in 2 completely different scenes, ADR doesn't match up with mouth movements, and it all has a very cheap-looking feel to it. There's a running plot line throughout the series about someone trying to get a hold of She-Hulk's blood, but we don't know who that is until the very last episode. In over 9 episodes of the series, that plot is nowhere to be found. By now you must be saying, but Shlomo, there must be some sort of point to this series. It can't just meander aimlessly from scene to scene, can it? For the most part, She-Hulk Attorney at Law does just that. We see Jen dating, practicing law, badly, and complaining about how life is so unfair to her as she blames everyone else and everything but herself. It's not until a scene in episode 7 that we get to the source of Jen's problems, which seem to fall into the same trap as a lot of modern superhero stories written by women. I'm looking at you, Gotham High, and I am not Starfire. And that is because she still has hang-ups about how she wasn't popular in high school.
You know, in high school, that friend that you have that's like cooler than you are, like more attractive and athletic.
Oh, for God's sake, you stake $25 million per episode into a series where the writers are trying to vicariously conduct a therapy session as to why their lives collectively suck? Are you kidding me? But oh my dear viewer, it gets much, much, much more worse than that. You remember that running B-plot I mentioned earlier. Well, as it turns out that after she hooks up with one of my favorite superheroes, Daredevil, and quite frankly, I need to do a walk of shame after having viewed this series. She-Hulk, along with 5 other lawyers, received participation trophies for Female Lawyer of the Year. And it's in this scene where we get our big reveal as to who the real bad guys of this series are. As it turns out, the real villains of She-Hulk Attorney at Law are internet trolls who were really mean to her. You spent 8 episodes building up to the point where your big reveal is that this series is all about how female writers have YouTubers and Reddit users living rent-free in their heads? I know how the creative team thinks that this is getting back at them, but all it really accomplished is shows how petty they really are. You spent all this time and money to say you're so thin-skinned that you had to use the full resources of Marvel Studios to get back at some guy in his bedroom making YouTube reviews? Now, you think that would be the end of it, but it's not. You see, She-Hulk was attempting to do the whole fourth wall breaking narrative, but never really committed to the bit. That is until the very last episode where all hell breaks loose on the screen. She-Hulk literally breaks out of the Disney Plus page menu, drops into the Marvel Studios wing of the Disney backlot, walks around very casually as if this is an everyday occurrence, and confronts the She-Hulk creative team, and demands that they change the story because she doesn't like Marvel movies. This unfunny group of assholes tells her that these ideas all came from, quote-unquote, Kevin. So she demands to see Kevin, and as it turns out, spoiler, it's not actually Kevin Feige, but a computer-controlled AI that looks like it's ripped off from Portal.
What?
The cake is indeed a lie. She-Hulk then tells the AI that we don't need to do the typical Marvel movie ending, and starts telling the AI what to do, and comes up with an ending that's suitable for her, and does it while conveniently inserting Matt Murdock into the ending because she has quote-unquote needs. So after all was said and done, the culmination of She-Hulk Episode 9's flatline of an arc was her walking into Marvel Studios and demanding to see their manager.
Are you serious?
Oh, brother. To say that She-Hulk was a waste of time would be an understatement. This was not only a waste of time, but also a waste of money, resources, and talent. She-Hulk as a series got progressively worse, and not only showed it had contempt for the source material, but also for the audience. It repeatedly talked down to its viewers and came across as condescending and childishly lectured the viewer. For what was touted as a comedy, there wasn't a single laugh in it. Nowhere. Not so much as a chuckle, a giggle, or even a guffaw. She-Hulk Attorney at Law wasn't just bad. It was bland, it was banal, and ultimately went nowhere. Not only did you make a fan favorite completely unlikable, but in a poll on YouTube where subscribers were asked who was more unlikable, correspondents chose Jen Walters over both Carol Danvers and Madison with a Y. When the annoying drunk party girl, who the writers threw in because what appeared to be a personal vendetta against someone they may have actually encountered in their day-to-day lives, is more popular than your protagonist, that's a real problem. Even after all that, She-Hulk still leaves me with one question. Who is She-Hulk Attorney at Law for? Seemingly, it doesn't appear to be for anyone but the few on the creative team who this all appears to be an inside joke for, that seemingly only they get. Everything looks as if it was designed to appeal to someone who spends a significant amount of time on the internet, and was deliberately designed to become an internet meme that would be posted on Twitter. In that sense, She-Hulk was a quote-unquote success in that it achieved what it set out to accomplish. In every other sense, it failed. It failed to take into account that its ideas weren't very good. It failed to deliver even the most basic structure of a coherent story. It failed to treat the audience as if it were reasonably intelligent. Most importantly, it failed to give the audience a main character that you could become invested in, and descended into some of the most tired cliches in storytelling. Cliches about how a particular type of woman views men, and how they have set out to blame them for all of these women's shortcomings. So to answer the aforementioned question, who is She-Hulk for? It is for women who hate comic books.
Hi, I'm Dana Schwartz.
Hate the men who like them, and have deliberately set out to destroy the very thing those men love. If it gets a season 2, I wouldn't expect anything better, especially if this creative team is still attached to it. She-Hulk Attorney at Law is a contemptible mess from start to finish. It's the worst that Marvel Television has to offer. She-Hulk Attorney at Law gets 0 Chewbacca's, and gets 1 Jar Jar. That's it for now. See you next time.